like to acknowledge that the press and the public have been duly noted or notified. And do we have any citizens' comments? None?
We do not.
Approval of the previous minutes. Any motion to approve?
So moved.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And we are adding to old business or new, is this?
It would be under new
Oh,
business.
new business. All right, so old business, the parking lot
I think you want to the
Make the motion.
motion
Yeah.
now to add it to the.
Oh, we need to make a motion now?
We
Okay. So I would like to make a motion to add a discussion on the easement request by the Water and Sewer Commission.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
And we'll talk about that under new business. Old business, discussion of the parking reconfiguration down at the marina. We were hoping to have something solid to discuss today. And there have been talks. The restaurant owners have been working with Mr. Klein. And I have talked to them a couple times. I think we're close to having something that is going to work for everyone. But the restaurant owners have been super busy with other things the last week or so and haven't had a chance to actually confirm what they like along with what we like. So we will push that off to the next meeting, if that's all right with everyone.
And just for the record, in your packets, we've included the latest layout that the restaurant folks came up with working with Matt Klein, who's been developing these concepts. Last month, we discussed a layout that Matt Klein drew up after hearing some of our feedback and what we think the city would like to see in the new reconfiguration of that parking layout. The restaurant at that time had requested the opportunity to review that and make some suggestions and changes to a plan that they would be supportive of. So this is what you have in your packet is that plan that they developed with Matt Klein.
Yeah.
On page 5.
Yes, sir.
But that is still kind of a work in progress from both sides. And I have a question about and I know we've talked about this, and I'm pretty sure I know the answer, but I've been asked it a few times. When we cover the ditch, trailer parking on 41st, I feel like I remember hearing somewhere along the way that was not a possibility. Can we get more clarification as to if I made that up or why?
Yes, we have had that conversation with Matt Klein to see whether the area that would be piped would generate enough space for parking of tip trailers. Currently, there is trailer parking allowed in the section of road right-of-way between Waterway Boulevard, the intersection of Waterway Boulevard and the end of the road of 41st, but it's parallel parking.
Right.
Even with piping the ditch because of the setback that we have to maintain from the property line, it's not enough space for an angled trailer parking space. What would be available would be people parking their truck and then separating their trailer, parking it next to the truck. It's not long enough to accommodate the trailer parking, and I believe Matt has designed it, has measured it, and just said it's not possible.
But you could still have parallel?
Yeah, and I think the issue with parallel is, well, there's two issues. One is you're asking folks to parallel park with a trailer attached, which is challenging. Or the other option is to leave kind of a very large swooping in space. But if you were to do that, your trade-off for car spaces to trailer spaces is something like 5 or 6 cars to every 1 trailer spaces. So I think it's possible. It's a very inefficient use of space in terms of.
Does it have to do with the angle? It's basically an angle. The angle would have to be fairly severe for it to be.
When you can't really get angle, so you're just parallel, and to parallel park a trailer tightly is very challenging.
Right.
So Matt's saying it would just need to be an extremely deep space, extremely wide space. And
Roughly
take
1
up-
to 5, you think? Or-
I think it's something like 1 to 5, maybe. I mean,
Do
we could figure that out, but that's the trade-off. It's a lot of car spaces that you lose per trailer space.
Do we anticipate this being actually marked parking spaces or just open for parking? Like the other streets on the island? Like, I guess that's the question, is if we just left it as, you know, the way that my street is, there's no parking spaces, so whoever comes can park however they want, kind of?
Well, in order for it to be organized, we haven't gotten to that level of detail
Right.
yet. There's no plan approved yet. But I would anticipate including some curb stops at the end, very similar to how we have on the non-ocean side of Palm Boulevard, where you have a curb stop at the end, and that guides people to park on a certain angle.
Right,
So that's at least what I have in my mind.
okay,
Just to make it organized. The police department loves how easy it is to park with the curb stop on Palm Boulevard. So it's gonna be up to the city to decide, but that's frankly what I would think would be the most efficient and organized way to do it, if it's gonna be vehicle parking
Right.
along that area.
okay. Thanks.
You're welcome.
Any other discussion on the parking that we don't really have yet? All right, then, we'll move on to the water and sewer easement.
Amy, can you turn the TV on?
Oh. Thank you. Here.
So this is
And just for the record, this item is for discussion again at the workshop tonight, so you're gonna be hearing it twice, but we wanted to bring it up to the committee as well.
And we have the water and sewer staff here, and they can speak in more detail about this, but this is a request for their effluent line. They need to increase the size of that line, I think, and potentially put it out farther into the, well, I'll let them talk about what their needs are, but that line is currently on the other side of the ditch that we're piping. They would like.
Can you just orient us real quick?
Yeah,
Where are we?
I will. They're wanting to put it on the marina side of the ditch.
So what is red, yellow, blue? Where? I can't read that, my eyes are so bad.
That's water, okay.
So this is Waterway Boulevard.
Oh, okay.
This
That's
is
why I was-
41st Avenue
To the marina.
to the marina. This is their water sewer treatment plant here.
Douglas, why don't you use?
Sorry.
And the different color coding has to do with whether it is in a right-of-way or in an easement. This blue section is in the Waterway Boulevard right-of-way. And then I can let them describe, but this is a combination of in a right-of-way, in their easement. And what they're requesting is specifically this red square. That's currently the city's property. It's in the exhibit you just looked at for parking. And they would like to put their effluent line through here, so they're requesting a new easement to allow them to do that. Currently, again, it's here in the backyard of these Intracoastal Court properties. I think that's caused them challenges to have it back in those properties' backyards, so I think they're wanting to move it to this side. It is a very busy strip. It has the parking that you are aware of. It has the massive pipes that are being installed now that you are aware of. It feeds electricity to Goat Island. That's in there. We have power lines that are currently overhead that serve the marina site. That's going underground. So this is a super busy corridor of utilities. So we've been having a lot of discussions with them about, exactly how to kind of sequence it, how to fit it all in. We're still waiting for a couple of things on this. The first thing we're waiting for is the electrical engineers for Dominion are working through all of the utilities and how to kind of get it all fit in. Also, we're waiting for, once that piece of the puzzle falls into place, we are planning to have MAC and their attorneys sit down and go through the details of an easement agreement that would also be part of this exhibit. So when the city were to grant the easement, if you were to grant it, there'd be an easement agreement that we still need to work through exactly, how we'll treat this if damage occurs to somebody's infrastructure, who's going to pay for that type of stuff. So there are still some details to work out, and we won't have those ready even for tonight's workshop, but with any luck, we could have it ironed out by your council meeting. But in order to grant this easement, the council will need to authorize the granting of that easement. So this is kind of to get you up to speed and familiarized with their request.
What's between the red area and then moving up,
Yeah.
yeah, there's a little square area that's doesn't look like it's in the lot. Who owns that little sliver? Yeah,
So this strip,
yeah.
Yeah.
so that dotted line is the middle of the,
Isn't that their existing easement?
so I think that is that's the rest of the easement that has all of the infrastructure in it.
Okay.
Is that,
So that's all city property too?
yes.
The drainage easement where the pipes are going down to there, right there.
Is the
Yes.
white area?
So that's not the property easement in the lot property?
So this is Mark
Is that what your
Yotis.
question's about?
He's with Thomas and Hutton. He's the
Mark,
Water and
over there.
Sewer Commissions.
No,
Right.
Well, I got it, and I want to give you a handout so you can see that a little bit better. And if you, I'm Mark Gildas with Thomas
Hi.
Hutton Engineering. I work with Isle of Palms Water and Sewer Commission. If you look at this, and because it's got a different color coding, you might be able to see it better. But I'll show you the. Yeah, she ignored me.
I got it.
So the property line is actually that dashed line that he was talking about. And then
This is the property line.
correct. And then there's the two drainage pipes that are be coming down that same corridor. So the sort of the right of way easement area is offset from that. We're trying to get it away from the drainage, away from the infrastructure that Dominion Energy has, and in a position in the proposed future parking, so it's kind of out of the way, because there's some trash receptacle with dumpsters will be in there. So we want to get it away from that, because that's a vertical structure. But they don't, if you have to go down and work on the line that's underground, you don't want that in the way. So that's kind of, it's almost in the drive aisle, so it's easy to get to. But if you had to get to it, you're not going to block fully the in and out. You might have one way for a temporary period, but that's what it is. And I wanted to point out that on that drawing on the screen, it's all red on the end. That's the easement we'd like to ask for. But if on this refined one, it's two different color reds, a darker and a lighter, because there's a permanent easement that will always be there, and then there's a temporary construction easement that I'd like to have just because it's need a little bit more working room. So the temporary construction goes away once construction is done. So it's not quite as expansive as that. The yellow in that drawing is an encroachment within the city owned and operated right of way of 41st Avenue. So that's an encroachment, not an easement.
And this is to carry affluent to the waterway?
Yes. So today, the wastewater is treated at that left-hand corner, and it goes through a small diameter pipe that is, over 53 years old. So it's past its useful life. It has some operational issues, and at some point, it's really not big enough because the plant was set up so that it would serve all the island. You know, both wild dunes, because that treatment is coming over to this facility, and you know, as you know, there's a couple of septic tanks on the island. It would be able to accommodate serving those areas with conventional sewer, because at some point, either by voluntary or involuntary action, you know, you probably have to do that. Now, may not be in our lifetime, but the wastewater plant was set up so it could accommodate that. So it's easy to do that. The discharge permits are set up to do that. And this is the thing that we don't want a problem with that line. And B, if we're gonna replace it, we're gonna make it big enough to meet the future needs.
12 inch?
This is maybe a
Is
stupid,
that 12 inch? Or how big?
It's actually gonna be 16 because we will rely on gravity. And, you know, the tides are getting up where they're kind of high. We need to be able to push that water out at the higher tides, so it's bigger.
why wouldn't we just use the existing stormwater drainage line, just dump it into there, right there?
Permitting wise, you can't do that by DHEC regulations. That's why.
Even though it's gonna mix once it gets to the waterway.
Yeah,
That makes sense.
yeah, we've
Don't
been there
look
and
too
done
hard
that.
into DHEC.
So,
Is the green,
so
that's
the
wild
green
dunes?
is a temporary construction, an easement on the property owner on the corner.
Okay.
And I'm sorry, senior moment, I can't remember their property name, but you know, they've got the golf course irrigation line, the golf course cart path. They got a lot of encroachment, so their property is right, you know, their fence is set way back, but it's out of the right of way
And
because
are they,
the
okay with
attorney
this?
for Isle of Palms Water and Sewer Commission has already reached out to them.
okay,
And I don't know the final signed deal, but yes, that's almost done. And then the blue in there is DOT, South Carolina DOT encroachment in their right of way, because they operate that part. So that's the color coding.
So if this gets granted, does the dotted line then move to the edge of the yellow and red line? And that goes away? That easement is no longer there? Is
The
that our-
existing easement with that's actually in the properties it's only a 15-foot easement, which is kind of narrow because the line's deep. There'd be no more need for it, so it could go away.
and what is the time, like, is this would obviously need to happen while this is open, right? So there's some urgency here?
Well, the Isle of Palms Water and Sewer Commission received a SKIP grant to fund this project and actually another project they have, and as well as putting sewer into a first basin up the road. And so there's timeline for that money has to be spent or you lose it by end of 2026. Yeah, June. Yeah, June 20. It has to be spent. So you know you got to get it permitted, built, and you know everything paid out before then. So-
Happening while we have this area under construction.
That's correct, right, Mark? That's my understanding. We're putting holes in our outfall structure at the end of this pipe that we're putting in now. We're putting the holes there so they can easily get through it in the casting. But I don't think that this effluent line actually goes physically into the ground for a good while, correct?
Well, this coming budget year, fiscal year 2020.
Yeah, so not while it's all under construction.
But is the question is, we won't have to.
Are we gonna have to tear it up and start over? Or is
Well,
this,
I think the goal is that this new line is done like right after the drainage line before you do any new parking stuff.
that's what I was
Yes.
wondering.
But, so how long away are you envisioning? You're not, I mean, I think you're talking about like a year away, right? Not a couple
Probably
weeks away.
September,
Yeah, probably September, right after tourist season.
right after tourist season.
So our project will be
Done by then.
complete.
So do we have to dig it,
The drainage
we're going to have to
project
dig
will
it
be
back,
complete.
we have to
Correct.
dig it back up again, or
Oh.
can you work underneath the?
Well, what we want to do is we kind of got to get a concurrence from y'all that this is doable. Is actually go to that contractor that's on site now and say, would you put this line, because we have a crossing here, and do something at the end so it's a little easier and less disturbance later on. And then all they got to do is the line down the road.
What's Plan B if we said no, we don't want to do this?
I'd have to defer to Chris Jordan, I'll probably.
We would probably have to like slip line the existing
Hey,
and.
Chris, why don't you just come up here so that the camera can pick you up?
Probably video inspect the existing, end up making some on it, slip lining it and going with the 8-inch line and not being able to increase like capacity on the island. We can only get so much through that 8-inch pipe. So we need the 16-inch pipe to expand sewer.
So really, there is no Plan B.
I mean,
For us to properly run the plant that we're now building, we've got to have a 16-inch line.
yeah, we need
And
the
this is the only
16-inch
place
line.
to put it.
And we don't have enough room in the existing easement that's heavily encroached upon to install the new line and keep the existing line active while that line is going in. So that's kind of been the challenge of why we wanted to move to the other side.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So just so I'm clear, if we, the timing on this, you can sort of pre-position, but we will have to re-dig up that area to position the pipe where you can work underneath what's the existing, if that's pre-positioned, and not disturb everything we're gonna do in that parking area. Or
Well,
I'm just kind of,
We have,
our expectation.
for
are we
the
gonna lay it
drainage
down and
project,
tear it up? Pardon?
for the drainage project that you're doing now, it's
Yep.
under control of whoever's doing it. There's one crossing of that line, and then we're actually tying into the same head wall that in the pipe, instead of going out and disturbing something else. Those, we were gonna ask the contractor to go ahead and do that, and we would pay that, right? And then, kinda, I think when they're more done, so we're not in their way and they're not in our way, start this outflow and outlaw after, the tourists kind of leave the island, there's not as much traffic.
Aren't we planning to be done before the season?
Yeah.
The drainage line.
The drainage
The
line.
drainage
parking.
line.
The parking too, or not?
I mean, we don't have
I
a,
don't-
we don't have a layout approved yet.
I think it would
But
be
yeah.
very aggressive to think we could get an agreed layout and go out for bids and get it done before we're busy. I
So
think
this could work concurrently, is what you're saying?
Ideally.
next winter, I think, is what we would be envisioning.
Yeah.
So like this season, the ditch will be piped and it'll be just kind of
Covered with,
covered temporary, I mean, we wouldn't pave and then it would be pretty easy for them to come in and finish it and then we make everything look nice after the fact.
And then you
with-
still have the
with
Dominion
their help.
work that has to be done. And I would think Dominion would get in before you do improvements to the parking. Because, they're, I don't know if you've seen their spaghetti drawings, but they got a lot of stuff on the ground, because there's a lot of overhead, but.
Yeah,
We are already working with them on like transformer locations, because they've got some big transformers they gotta put out there that would probably go in like a parking aisle, where the island would be instead of in the parking space or, kinda out of the way. But
yeah, a little bit of this has been, Matt Klein's working on parking, they're working on effluent. Another person at Thomas Nutton is working on drainage. Dominion is working with Pike, and quite honestly, they're all kind of aware of the other, but they're not really fine tuning their plan to be a cohesive, working together plan.
We've already took the drainage and we moved it away from that. And then I got the parking layout as best as possible, and we adjusted the line for that. And then worked with Pike actually yesterday, this morning, about him moving his utilities and notes.
So that's kind of
so we
happening.
do have kind of.
It's happening now.
I mean, do we need to have all of these entities sit down and come up with a actual like timeframe, plan of attack situation?
So the attorneys requested that this happen now, this kind of engineering feasibility analysis from all the engineers. So that's happening now. The next step, once they've all kind of said, yes, we can do it, here are conditions by which we think it should happen. The next step will be this easement agreement. And, again, things there that we've been bouncing back and forth, or who's gonna pay for what if our,
Something happens.
if something happens, who pays for that?
Mutual maintenance.
How do you, yeah, so that kind of level of detail will get worked through. And the other challenge, you know, as you all know, the parking, we've never really been able to identify an agreeable parking plan. So we have wanted to kind of maintain some flexibility. I mean, Mark talked about, there's a dumpster, you know, can a dumpster go into this easement if it's necessary to put the dumpster there in order to work successfully through an agreement with the parking plan? Just a lot of moving pieces in this corridor.
And we've moved
obviously.
the line to accommodate that, so.
But there's just no
taking the
guarantee
parking
that,
and say, we want to be over here and not, you know, where you might have some vertical structure.
Well, this all makes sense, and I think it's great, but all I'm trying to figure out too is we just talked about the parking plan. And it sounds to me like realistically, even if we came to a conclusion on the parking plan, that whole 41st stretch is gonna be a construction site probably through this season. So just from an expectation standpoint, I mean, we're not probably gonna want people parking, even if we come into an agreement, parking there, and it's not gonna be available while we've got all of this good stuff going on.
yeah,
Well,
we already
our-
have it.
Yeah, our plan was to have a parking layout agreed upon this winter so that it would be incorporated into the construction timeline after the Waterway Boulevard, where the drainage project was completed. That's not gonna be possible. We're already in mid-February. We don't have a parking layout. And then this request is also adjusting, I guess, is making
And
us
it'll
adjust
come,
that
but
timeline.
Yeah.
Correct.
It's just gonna be another season, yeah.
And the effluent outfall project would go a lot quicker than the drainage projects because it's smaller pipe, you're not dual pipes, and I think the soil conditions will probably be more conducive to moving along quicker.
And
But I could see them being done by February of next year if they start, say, September 1st with the effluent outfall project, and hopefully the drainage is already done by then. So in theory, you may, you know, depending on timing and dominion, you could almost have parking in before tourist season picks up next year.
Our current substantial completion date for the drainage project is August
Okay,
of this year.
but it's it's finishing at Waterway and then moving back, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
We also have a community dock also being built, all right in the middle of it. So it is a very,
But
very
it's,
busy
it's
site.
down, in the- it's
There's a
on
lot
a different
going around,
location,
going
you know,
on.
a dock is, you know, self-contained.
Right.
It's
So
just
just
another
a
thing.
little-
It's just
lot
another
of trucks,
project
a lot
that's,
of-
you know, a lot of activity happening in that
No,
corner.
it's good. I mean, but might as well do it all now,
That's right.
right?
So it's dock, dominion, parking, drainage, sewer.
A lot of moving parts.
A lot of
Yeah.
moving parts.
And I'm sure there'll
It's
be something else
progress.
come up.
It's
Yeah.
progress.
Good.
Are there any issues that we've encountered on the easement language that we need to get some guidance from the committee on expectations of what that would include?
I think we've mentioned, I mean, the only two kind of sticking points is their, from my perspective, their typical language in an easement says they will only seed or put asphalt down. If they have to trench through something that we've built, their typical language would say, you know, if we had to cut through parking benches or curbing, they're not gonna replace that. So that would put that burden on the city. So I think
Well,
I
that's
think we're
the
working.
typical language of any easement agreement, but we go above and beyond to restore the site as good, if not better, than it was when we.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
when we-
And that would be
Like
included in the
curbing, if it was
language?
curbing, I'm sure curbing would be replaced, and that's part of.
Yeah,
So-
curbing and guttering and like
Yeah.
landscape, we don't want big grand oak trees planted on top of the pipe, but
So we shouldn't anticipate any pushback or issues with us wanting language in that easement agreement that establishes that any construction would be returned to pre-project conditions.
yeah, I mean,
Okay.
it's just like the front beach easement underneath all that parking, we've got water lines underneath all of that. If we had to dig that up today, we'd put it back, replace sidewalk, curb and gutter and all that stuff.
Okay.
With the three occupants, I know in kind of in the telecom world, when you're sharing conduits or trenches, the mutual maintenance is sort of the hard one to crack. Is that something that it would be you, Dominion, and the city to try to determine if there's a failure, what's the method of determining it and who's gonna pay for the repair? Is that kind of?
Yeah, I think that
Yeah,
boils
if it was our
down,
pipe, we would make our repair and do the repair of the surrounding area.
Yeah, that's kind of the nuts and bolts of, that we've put in the hands of the lawyers to figure out how to deal with that. But beyond just the engineering challenges, that's the next challenge, that we think will get worked through.
But the outfall line is not, this isn't something that we dig up all the time to do maintenance on. I mean, it just.
It's 50
it might
years
not
old,
ever
right?
get-
The one that's there is
the
50
hope.
years old.
Yeah,
Yeah. I mean, the existing one, the only place we've dug it up is inside the property to make a repair on a joint in 50-something years. Right. Yeah.
This is another, just, I'll do the plug. This is another reason why, having a new layout that gives the city control of that corner lot seems to be a very practical path for the city, because there's just so much happening in that
Yeah.
corner, that not having to include in the conversations, which we would have to now, the restaurant, because they do have a lease for that corner lot. It's just, it would add a level of complication that hopefully if we agree on a new layout, we can mitigate.
Yeah, I guess that's an excellent point, is that I think, in addition to all this stuff going on, I do think there's a lease line that also crosses over that red, and it probably crosses over in this exhibit, the lighter red, not the permanent easement, but the temporary easement. So another kind of layer of stuff to deal with.
And I'm from the restaurant, all I see is positive parking, so to me, I'd be, yeah, let's go, because, customers walking out there after a rain is not as good as walking in asphalt, so.
Right.
And I would echo him, I think it is a minimum of 5 parking spaces that you lost, probably more like 6 regular parking spaces for a
Trailer.
trailer.
Thank you, Mark.
Yeah.
Thank you, Chris.
Thank y'all.
Y'all need any more of these, or?
Probably tonight.
I was gonna say, I'll
Yeah, you
save
can-
mine for tonight.
Yeah, you can leave them with us, Mark.
Yeah,
Don't have to-
we'll
We'll
hand,
use them.
we'll have those ready for them tonight.
How many more do you need? Cause I've got,
There'll be 5,
oh, I got
Six.
At least 6.
okay.
thank you.
And I've got 2 big ones too, if you'd rather have these are a bit easier to get to, but I have a 24 by 36, and those would help.
I think those
Might
are
bring one along.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
So we didn't need to do we don't need to make a recommendation or do anything on that?
Not
That
at
was
this
just-
point,
Okay.
no.
All right, so now we move on to the review of 10-year capital plan for public works, recreation, drainage, front beach, and marina.
All right, well, I'll get started. I handed you, it's the same 10-year capital plan. The only addition to what you have in the packet is a comparison of our current FY24. Councilmember Peters requested also having the opportunity to see the FY25 as it's currently envisioned in our 10-year capital plan, so that you can see what has changed from our current 10-year capital plan to what we're requesting and changing in FY25 as
We
of
can
today.
get that at the next round. Yeah.
Yes, we can do that. So we'll go ahead and get started with the Public Works Department. I'll just touch on the new additions, changes, and stop me any time along the way for any questions. But the addition to the FY25 budget requests for the Public Works Department includes the fuel management system and fuel dispensers. We had about $12,000 before. We increased that to $40,000. That's line 150, to include the replacement of fuel dispensers. Those are original and are in need of repair. So that amount has increased from our original FY25 projection last year. We have moved and deferred the construction of the 14th Avenue undergrounding of utility lines. We have that in our current budget. We are still working through and hoping that construction of that project can happen before the season. But as you know, 14th Avenue is the center and the entrance to our Front Beach Commercial District. So we would not recommend or pursue any construction, even if it's getting closer to the season. So we're anticipating having to defer that and having construction done at the end of this year, which would be in FY25. Line 154, that includes the,
Desiree, quick
Yes.
question. The 24 had 75, and now we've got 75 and 25, and then another 226, so that's 350. It was 275. Did it go up? Or
It did
are
go
we gonna
up.
spend the 20?
So the
Okay.
$200,000 that are forecasted in FY26 relate to the third project that is on our list, and that is for the marina property, undergrounding the utility lines, end of 41st towards the end of that road towards the marina.
Those lines, is that for Goat Island or is that for the marina?
That's for the marina.
Okay. But- okay.
Yes. And that estimate has increased, Scott. I think that's a difference that you'll see.
So it went from 275 to 350?
Correct.
The total, yeah.
Correct, yes. And again, these are estimates. The $75,000 for the 14th Avenue project is consistent to the recent estimates we got from Dominion, but the 200,000, that's a very, I will say, an educated guess at this point from us and Dominion Energy.
Okay, and just kind of looking at the prior version, it looks like we were deferring that with the 20-yard packer out from the
Oh,
original.
yes. Let me say that. And thank you for that. I'm sorry. I should have started with that. We included the replacement of the 20-yard packer rear loader for FY25. The reality is that the lead time for construction of those vehicles is 18 months. So we would request City Council to authorize us submitting a letter of intent for the purchase of that vehicle, which was originally scheduled for FY25. But again, because of the lead time, we won't receive it until later next year if we order it essentially as soon as possible. The other one was originally scheduled for FY27. And this is something that we're going to be discussing at more length at a future meeting. But we are preparing and having conversations about switching some of our equipment from a rear loader to a side loader. Right now, as you all know, our garbage collection requires personnel on the back of the vehicles to collect trash. Some of what, I think we talked about this before, some of what we've heard from our insurance company and the reality on the ability to secure temp labor for that type of work is limited. So we need to start thinking about the future in the event that type of temp labor is no longer available due to insurance costs, and really it's an unsafe operation. Luckily, we've never had any issue. But that's part of the reason why a lot of communities are moving away. Insurance is recommending that we consider a side loader operation. However, the reality is there are some areas on the island that it will not be as feasible to transition from the traditional rear loader operation to a side loader. So we will always have a need for rear loaders in the Public Works Department as long as we continue to operate garbage on the island in-house. So our plan is to transition 3 of the current fleet to a side loader and maintain 2 rear loaders. So that's why you see a $390,000 amount, $390,000. Those side loaders are more expensive than rear loaders. So we are planning for within the next 10 years to replace all of our fleets, which they will need to be replaced in the next 10 years, but replacing some of them with side loaders. So at this point, it's conceptual. Moving and changing the operation of garbage collection will require also new training, will require replacing the garbage cans, which you'll see on line 154. To a different type of a can that would support essentially the arm, the side arm. So it's part of a transition, but we're starting to articulate what that would look like in the next 3 to 5 years if we decide to go down that path.
So, okay, so just so I'm clear, it looks like the two items, we're changing maybe the configuration, but that's another, it looks like another 205,000 increase on the equipment. And then we're adding the 150, if I'm reading this right?
100,000.
Down, 100,000 for the, new cart, okay, yeah, the new carts.
Correct. So we are thinking about it being a phased approach. So every year we would replace a third of the cans on the island. So that's why you see 100,000 in FY 25, 26, and 27.
And excavators, new?
That's associated with the drainage, our drainage operations.
Okay. So plus 210.
So
The
that's,
the amount of those trucks have gone up. We've gotten recent quotes.
Yeah.
So that's why you see 320,000 for the rear loader and 390,000 for the side loader.
Yeah, I mean, it looks like I'm sorry, go ahead. Okay,
well, I was just gonna say, so if we switch people to the cans, don't we have to have the side loader? What comes
No,
first, the
you
cart
can-
or the horse?
We have been, and Donnie, please chime in. We have been replacing cans as they get damaged. We have been replacing those cans with the new type of can that we would need if we move to a side loader operation.
So the new ones can be used for either.
Correct. But all of them have to be in place before we change our
Gotcha.
operation from a
So
rear
would we
loader.
do that by region, zone, something like that,
Yes.
area?
So, because the island is split in half, two days to service the entire island, a side loader would operate one route here and one route in your area or Wildoons. So, but to do that, you need to replace all of the cans on the island before you get to your side loader operation. But the new cans with the black top, those are the Toter, made by Toter, that's the company. The older cans with the lighter green flexible top, that's not conducive to any side loading operation. They bend and warp, and side loader just can't handle it.
Okay, and where I was going is, it looks like we're 200,000 roughly lighter this year in the forecast compared to where we were 6-7 months ago, but we're about 600 higher, or 800 higher in 26 than where we were in the prior. So, and I think it's the deferral. So
It is.
it looks like the deferral, but that's it's nice that we're lower this year, but we've increased our forecast next year by $800,000.
Well, some of it is related to drainage, and the other is we've pushed out. We had a replacement of the, it's currently a rear loader, replacing it with a side loader in FY 27. We've pushed that to FY 26 just because the conditions of those trucks, we cannot continue to defer. We've deferred it for a long time,
No,
and they
understood.
need
It's just
replacement.
our costs are escalating considerably, is what it sounds like, Donnie. Is that what I'm
So
hearing?
that deferral also, if the plan goes forward with side loading operations, would be a one-time cost with the carts, and then that goes away.
Okay, thanks.
And then we'll also be saving some on the having to hire the temps, right? I mean,
There should be some
will
cost savings.
Cost savings.
Well, there would
Personnel?
be savings on some temp labor, but there would be more expenses on the vehicle maintenance side. Probably a wash or even worse.
So we'll be evaluating that. I mean, this is a planning document of what we're anticipating for the next few years. We will need to have more discussions and more analysis of just shifting our operation from a rear loader and side loader. There's certainly some pros associated with that, but there's some other challenges that we'll need to mitigate and plan for as well.
But it's also gonna be something that's at some point probably gonna be taken out of our hands. Like, we're gonna have to make this shift, right? I mean, if we can't find people to do the job.
If you can't find temp labor, then it would be up to the city to hire full-time staff to serve that role. One addition was not included in our capital plan that we're evaluating at this point is the purchase of a high water vehicle that would be split and used between the fire department and the public works department. The concept would be to have a piece of equipment that could be used for yard debris collection, and during training and storm events, the fire department could utilize it to go over flooded waters. So we're, at this point, just conceptualizing, evaluating the concept of whether that would work. And the cost, based on a recent quote that we have, it's about $110,000 that would be split between the police, the Public Works and the fire department. Next page, we'll talk about the drainage. We maintain our general drainage contingency for small projects at $100,000. The drainage improvement project on Palm Boulevard between 37th and 41st was identified as the next project we want to pursue as part of our drainage master plan. That we had budgeted about $1 million in our current FY24 budget. We have, and that was based on an estimate that we received from Thomas and Hutton from about 8 years ago. So we've increased that estimate to $2 million for that. That project would be pretty substantial. You know that in that area there's no drainage infrastructure, and that would cover about 4 blocks. We continue our 3-year maintenance rotation for drainage, and that's the ED's contract that we maintain and manage. Drainage phase 3, we anticipate that project being completed before the end of this fiscal year. 41st Avenue should also be completed. There might be some migration, but this is not a project that we are paying for. It's being paid by SCORE directly through them, so we don't have to rebudget any expenses associated with that. The only piece that the city's paying is the $29,000 for permitting and the recently approved change order to expand the pipe, which again we anticipate that being completed in FY24.
Desiree, quick question on the back on the drainage. I
Yes.
think one of the things I think that's really helpful to point out too. It looks like we got state funding and the ARP funding that's going to cover that
Yes.
most of that increase, or it looks like, or all of that increase.
That is correct. So what we're anticipating now, the funding source for that next big project for drainage, is to use $1.1 million of the ARP funding that the city received from the state, and $1 million of a dedicated drainage state allocation in FY24 that we've already received.
Could I sidetrack just a second on that same?
Knock
project?
yourself out.
That specific project is one, as Desiree mentioned, had been kind of on the drawing board for years, going back to when we did the internal projects. It's continuously been, and I think now kind of elevated itself to the top project. So we would want to do it as quickly as possible anyway, but just since they were here and they mentioned it, the Water and Sewer Commission is planning to implement a project in that exact area soon, like in the coming year. You see the challenges that we have when infrastructure gets planned next to each other, and the separations and the working kind of next to each other. So that, in an effort to plan that and potentially execute it around the same time as their sewer project, we really wanted to fast track that and get that before you and the ball rolling on that project as soon as possible. So probably we were hoping that we would have design proposals this month to really kick that design off. There's a missing piece of their proposal that they're filling in now, but we should have that at your next month meeting. So we really do need to kind of get that going for multiple reasons quickly.
And this is the 37th, or
Yes.
this is the?
37, so it's down Palm.
Yep.
So it's the kind of massive collection of water on the side of Palm and where they deploy pumps between 41st and 37th, but running down Palm Boulevard.
Yeah.
Same area that they're planning to install a very large sewer line.
And this would be on the landward side or the seaward side of Palm?
They've gone back and forth a little bit, and I think it depends on, I think initially it was gonna be on the landward side, but I think now the sewer is planned on the landward side, so they may want to pivot it to the seaward side. So that's exactly kind of the reason we want to get it going, just so we can position ourselves well, physically, kind of in the ground.
Because
when all
aren't
this
we
work is-
also having talks with the DOT about all of Palm Boulevard? Is that another wrinkle in the planning of this, or or we just won't worry about that until it happens?
I don't think it would be a problem. I mean, any changes to Palm Boulevard that we've been talking about and the concepts that DOT have developed for us, that's a long-range plan, and it would require a lot of funding from the state and the local level. I don't think that any drainage infrastructure that we install there in the future would just be tied to additional drainage infrastructure that would be needed when we work on other areas of Palm.
Okay.
So we're essentially accelerating that area by ourselves.
Cool.
That's a good point. Thank you for making that.
Can I ask one more request?
Yes.
I'm probably driving you crazy here with this. But the out years to me look like, based on our current history and cost escalations and things, and just for planning purposes, since this is a 10-year capital plan, would you take a maybe little more detailed look on what the out years look like for our drainage plan in light of the information that we've been receiving from Davis and Floyd and all the others? And I'm just wondering if these costs are light compared to what we probably truly will need going forward for both the drainage and the maintenance.
They are, and that's what we're intending to do on line 169, rather than putting a placeholder, having a project identified. So we did that for FY25. The out years just include a placeholder, and now we have a list of projects that we can identify and have for each year what area we're going to be working on, and we'll certainly do that. So going on, I've talked about 41st Avenue. Then the next project is the Waterway Boulevard multi-use path. As you know, city submitted a grant to FEMA last year. We believe we're 90% sure that we will be receiving 90% of that grant. That request was for $1.1 million. We still budgeted the expense of that project, even though we anticipate receiving FEMA funding, for at least 90%. That it's a 90-10 share. That estimate has gone up a little bit from 1.1 to 1.5, and the reason for that is the original design for the Waterway Boulevard Path Elevation Project assumed a level of protection of about 6 feet NAVD. We have obviously seen the impacts of flooding in that area after the December nor'easter, and we have asked the engineers to evaluate increasing the level of protection from 6 to maybe 6.5 or 7. I think that 6.5 may be the most feasible option for us to consider. So that will essentially increase the cost of some of the drainage infrastructure by going a little bit higher. And we've also asked them to evaluate installing drainage infrastructure between 21st and 23rd on Waterway Boulevard. That was an area that this December got flooded and had standing water for multiple days. We want to address that as part of that project. So we've increased the cost. We don't anticipate this being an issue with the FEMA funding. They'll still fund 90% of the original cost, but our share may be higher if we want to adjust that scope of work to take care of some of these areas that we identified as not being really, I guess, being deficient at this point.
So ours would be roughly 600,000 or 700,000?
Correct. Again, this is based on estimates. Once we have bids, we'll know exactly how much that is. But that would be an increased cost to the city to, again, address some of these areas. Are there any questions?
No, thank you.
So the main drivers of the change is we've moved the timeline for the purchase of our big pieces of equipment for garbage collection to FY26. We do anticipate needing approval for a letter of intent due to the 18-month lead time in construction, and also the drainage projects. There's some shifting there. All right, we ready for any questions for me or Donnie? So takeaway, we'll drop into the 10-year capital plan, the FY25 request that's included in our current budget, so that you can see the changes from what had been planned last year to what we're requesting and changing today. And then we'll refine the drainage projects for the off years based on the master plan.
And if you can note, like what you just pointed out, if our share of funding is going to be increasing, that's cash out of our coffer that I think would be helpful to identify.
Well, for that project, we're budgeting the entire expense in the
Correct.
event that we do not, that we don't get the FEMA grant.
Right, but it's more, if we do get the FEMA, the 90% now applies only to the 1.1, not to the 1.5
Correct.
is what I'm hearing. So that would be an additional, we'd have to pick up the 90% of that. We'd have to pick up the entire 500 on top
Correct.
of it, yeah.
All right, for the recreation department, there's really two things that we wanted to mention that are new. The line 197 playground equipment, we are requesting to have to replace the playground equipment at the recreation center. Most of it is 20 years old, maybe more. The condition, we could share some pictures with you if you want, but it's getting in a bad condition. I think it's harder to get
Correct.
pieces of equipment to fix it. So the $500 would include a new playground equipment. That's about, the estimates that we have are about $300,000. But we also would like to replace the mulch with a new pour and play. So it's a rubber material that lasts longer, doesn't need to be replaced, and it's what we're seeing in new playgrounds in the area. It's kind of the new thing. And that's about $200,000. So that's really the biggest driver associated with the increase in the recreation department's budget. They have a golf cart that needs to be replaced, so that went up a little bit just on current costs. They have a pickup truck that it's used by the staff for hauling equipment, supplies for special events that's scheduled to be replaced in this upcoming budget year as well. And
Can I ask a question? Back to the 500,000, that's a pretty big chunk of money. Is there a way we could, if we had to defer that in light of everything else, is that something we could defer? Is it also something where we can maybe start looking at sources? I don't know how we can fund this. Is there an opportunity to look at additional sources of funding at the rec center? I don't know, and get creative there, but that's in light of all the other priorities, this seems like a pretty large number of additional investment. And if the timing is required, can we push this out if we need to do that?
There's ways that we could break it up too. The one piece of equipment, which I would call the big toy, which is the 5 to 12 toy, that's actually scheduled to be replaced next year in FY26, which is that 115 number. So that would drop off.
So would the 115 come out of the 500, or
it would
is that
be,
part
yeah,
of, that's part of the
it,
500?
yeah.
Is it double budgeted then?
yeah, I think it is.
It just didn't come off there. So, so looking out that way, some of the equipment needs to be replaced. There's no going around it. So we can and the amount that needs to be replaced on that toy, it would just be easier to get the whole new piece, because we're talking about 3 different types of decking, a whole section of a play piece. So that one, in a safety aspect, that piece
Has to be replaced?
Yes.
Can on the next round, can we sort of isolate what needs to be versus what
Sure.
different options?
Yeah.
I don't know if we
And
can
so,
get
and
sponsorships
the
or
play
something.
surface is a big expense too. So, and if that's not the way that you all would like to go, or we could plan that out later, that can be done later. So it can be broken up.
Maybe itemize, itemize
Could be
this one
phased
out.
out.
Yeah.
Okay, let's do that.
How does the surface affect, like, replacing things, changing? Are you more stuck with, if you put that board in place and, 10 years down the road, you
they
want to
usually
switch
do it
something
in
out?
colors, in different colors. So you notice if you go to a park that has that, there's usually 2 or 3 different colors, and it's kind of done in a design, which makes it not as noticeable. If you did a solid color, that you would have to break it up.
So you can
but you can
piecemeal it?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. Yes.
Thank
And
you.
then the other big piece, big item that we have in FY '25 is replacing the flooring in high tide. A few years ago, we had significant flooding inside the building due to some a water pipe that just burst. And we replaced the flooring at the Magnolia Room and
You know that firsthand.
I know, we were all there cleaning that day. And we replaced the flooring on the big hallway, but that room was not replaced at that time. Didn't look like it had a lot of damage, but in the last year or so, it's starting to bubble up. So that we need to get that flooring replaced, and that is a room that it's used for fitness classes
Correct,
a lot.
yes.
So yeah, we're looking at a 55% increase, and it's mainly due to the playground equipment. We'll get some additional information, see if we can phase that out. Just give ourselves a few options to consider as we go along the budgeting process.
And is that something we can use ATEX?
Yeah,
Because that is
we have
being used by people
Correct.
from all
That
over.
is-
And
It is the biggest attraction, I would say, that we have, and we utilize it for all of the events. So it's utilized, obviously, at the farmer's market, Easter egg hunt. I mean, we typically use it as an attraction to, hold stuff right there, to make it easier for parents, too. But, I mean, there are people that use it all the time for birthday parties, and it's a busy place to be.
It is pretty typical for us to fund these expenses associated with at the recreation center with a combination of capital projects, general fund money from the city, and tourism funds. Is what we did with the tennis courts, the pickleball courts. They're all supplemented pretty heavily with tourism funds as well.
You had mentioned a while back or talked about possibly doing some reconfiguration with the ball fields and maybe doing some I think I've listened to consolidation possibilities or something. Is that still something that you're
Yeah.
looking to pursue this year or next year? Or?
Not in FY '25.
Okay.
But it is something that is being, as you noted, we have a lot of things happening on
All
FY
right.
'25. So we're trying to prioritize. But it is something that long-range planning, we're seriously evaluating how that could be reutilized.
Okay, thanks.
All right, so now moving on to Front Beach area. The only addition that we have is resurfacing the city-owned portion of Ocean Boulevard. As you know, that's section of road between 14th and 10th. It's owned by the city, so any maintenance associated with that would fall on the city. And these are part of our efforts at spending some TLC on Front Beach and improving the aesthetics and the condition of our main commercial corridor. Any questions on Front Beach?
so that's resurfacing and sidewalks?
We're keeping the ongoing sidewalk placeholder of $70,000. We do it as needed and sort of in a phased approach during the off season. This past year, the city made improvements to the sidewalk and the corner area of Ocean Boulevard where it connects to Pavilion Drive. You may remember we did some enhanced landscaping and what is it called?
Entrance to the parking lot.
The entrance to the parking lot. So that's the funding that we use for that. So we anticipate needing some additional funds to continue down that path.
But that's to resurface the road, like that whole area from 10th to 14th?
Correct, and that's an estimate. All right. Beach maintenance, monitoring, and access. You all recall this year in FY '24, the city also received a state budget allocation of $500,000 for the installation of 2 ADA compliant boardwalks. The construction of those will be included in FY '25. So we've included it there so that we can use all of the money that we received in that project. In your next version, we'll probably include about $50,000 as a budgetary item to allow us to make any repairs or make any repairs to our existing boardwalks. We typically keep a $250,000 placeholder for either adding a boardwalk or repairing or replacing an existing one. So the 500 would be for 2 new ones, but we would like to keep a placeholder for any needed maintenance or repairs as needed. The project at the county park that we've been working on for about a year with the fire department to make improvements to the vehicular access path so that we can move them away from utilizing the Fifth Avenue beach access path and go access the beach in a more efficient way through the county park. So that project, as I reported last month, will need to be rebudgeted to FY25 due to the construction window closing ahead of the season. And based on some of the revisions from the county park, we believe that that project will be higher than 200,000. Again, this is a estimate. Once we go out for bid, we'll know exactly how much that will be, but that's why that has increased from 200 in FY24 to 250.
So that's a deferral.
That is a deferral,
okay,
yes,
thank you.
due to timing.
Got it.
We have under beach maintenance, we've already engaged CSC on the design permitting of both of the shoal management project offshore, at least for the first portion of the design and permitting for those 2 projects, and also identifying borrow areas for the breach inlet side. So what we're budgeting FY25 is about $400,000 for the Army Corps project, although we anticipate that being completed before the end of this fiscal year. But it's not budgeted in our current FY24. So if that for some reason has to be delayed, again, this is not a project we're controlling on. We don't control the timeline on that project. Then we've put it there as a placeholder in FY25. But my hope is that we don't have to, that we spend that this year, this fiscal year, which will need to be approved by council later on. Please note too, the 2 big projects that we're planning as large scale project for both the north end and the south end are in FY27. We're looking at about a year of permitting for that. And you can see we're using our estimates from prior projects to anticipate a project of that magnitude down at Breach Inlet to be about $13 million. For the Waldoons project, we looked at the city's historical cost share with the Waldoons Community Association and the resort for larger projects down at Waldoons. We're looking at about $3,750,000 for what would be the city's share. Also note the city's share in the past has been lower due to the fact that we've been able to secure funding from FEMA and from the state. That may not be the case on a future project. So that's just something that we have to think about when we're looking at later on, projects on the horizon for the beach. These projects are very expensive, and because the biggest part of the expense is associated with immobilization and demobilization. So any large project that we conceptualize, our goal would be to consolidate and do both projects at the same time. And you just pay one mobilization fee and then just have the dredge move from one area to the other. It doesn't make sense to have a project 1 year, pay $3 million, $4, $5 million in mobilization, and then have to do the same the following year. So those larger scale projects are being conceptualized and planned at the same time so that they happen at the same time again.
So on this particular item, and I think this impacts our current budget, because if we've got, and we were all at that conference and looking at what the funding is at the state level, and unless we have a FEMA activity, I think we're on the hook for this ourselves, and with some help from Waldoons. And I've also seen estimates as high as, this 13 might, by 27, be as high as 20 million. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, this is something that, can we have a discussion, I think probably with the greater group of, how do we plan on maybe financing that, and how does that impact our spending plans this year and next year if we have to plan for a $20-some-odd million renourishment 2 years from now? Mm-hmm. I think we've really got to take that into consideration again if we think we might have to be on our own on that.
That's right. I mean, that's the most important conversation I think we
Yeah.
need to have
It-
as
it
part of this
changes
process.
priorities, yeah.
We're planning for the worst, right? You know, we have this Army Corps of Engineers project happening this year. We're also in the permitting process and preparing the application of a shoal management project down at on the north end. What we anticipate is those two projects giving us some time between being able to do this as a small, medium-term solution between now and having to execute a larger scale project. Conditions, though, seem to indicate that what we in the past had anticipated maybe 4 or 5 years of timing between a shoal management project and a larger scale project, that timing is shrinking just because of the sea level rise and just ongoing storms and abnormal high tides. So we don't know yet, right? It would be ideal that this Army Corps project would give us a few years of breathing room to go through the permitting process and conceptualize the project both on the north end at the same time. And hopefully it's not FY27. Maybe we can push that in FY28. But we're trying to be proactive in thinking, worst case scenario, the shoal management project, hopefully we get it permitted and do it. But if we don't get it permitted, then we're looking at it really having one option, which would be the larger scale project on the north end. Again, we have the Army Corps project scheduled for this summer, but we don't know how that's going to perform, if it's going to last us 6 months or 6 years.
Yeah, I think they said this, I think the mayor was actually talking about the value of that sand drop of 550,000 cubic yards is around $10 million.
Yes,
So, and we did double that up at Wild Dunes last time, didn't we?
correct. And we were anticipating a 10-year cycle, and we saw how, the conditions, we now are seeing the conditions at Beechwood East after being part of a $15 million project not too long ago.
Yeah. Can I ask one more question on the WDCA line item, the 750,000? Is that budgeting both sides? It says cost share. Is that 750 plus they're going to put in 750, so it's a $1.5 million project, or are we budgeting their contribution on that? Or do we
On the
know?
shoal management
Yes.
project? No, that's the, I believe that's just the city's contribution. I would have to go back to look at our notes.
So it'd be a $1.5 million project then?
Yes, potentially.
I'm thinking that's the.
That's a full amount?
I think that's the. full
Okay,
amount.
so that may be the
I
full
don't-
amount, which
So
would
would
be
we,
cost
would we,
shared,
would we only budget then our share, our half of that, I would
We
think?
should.
Yeah.
just to be consistent to what we're doing for the larger scale project.
And is that an automatic, we have that cost sharing already worked out, or is that just the way it's happened in the past?
We're using what we've done in the past for the past 2 projects. It's been a cost share. There is a portion of Wild Dunes that would be eligible for public access to meet the public access definition to receive state and federal funding. And that's part of the cost share analysis. So this is a sheet that we'll be refining as time goes on, depending on the condition of the beach and what we're anticipating happening in the next couple years, but certainly should be top of mind,
And that's
particularly.
also, I know one of the, I think, stated few main goals of the ad hoc committee is to come up with funding for these obvious need in the future.
Yes.
And
And
so that's obviously something that's being looked at, not just here, but in lots of other areas of the city. So.
yes, it is a statewide issue. I mean, we're not the only beach that are dealing with beach erosion. A lot of the state's beaches are managed by the Army Corps of Engineers, and that's something that I know the mayor wants to really highlight throughout the meetings with the ad hoc committee, is at least understanding what that arrangement would look like if the city wanted to have a Army Corps of Engineers managed beach, like Edisto, like Folly, like Myrtle Beach. So that's one path. There's pros and cons, but we just have to go through that. And also just understanding the reality of funding. The state approved $48 million back in 2018. That we received about $3 million for the north end for the project at Wild Dunes. There are bills right now being considered to establish a dedicated source of funding. What we have been consistently hearing from our lobbyists is that is certainly a great initiative, but whether it has chance of being fully embraced by the legislature, We're not very confident that it will. The governor has proposed $7 million of a one-time funding for beach renourishment, but as you see the prices of these projects, they're pretty dramatic, and we're not the only beach. So the $7 million would not go to Isle of Palms. We'd be sharing that. So regardless of any funding that we get from the state, the reality is that the city's share will either have to be 100% or pretty significant. Are there any other questions on?
I don't know if you want to go through the marina piece.
Oh, yes. I'm sorry. All right, so we have the public green space. We have that scheduled for or budgeted in FY24. As time continues to go slip through our hands, we're looking at having to need to and it's not there now, but we'll probably need to rebudget the public green space portion to FY25, as well as the resurfacing of what would be the city's, hopefully, the city's portion of the parking lot. So that would be $300,000 for that project. The improvements to the public for the T-Dock, I think I mentioned this last time. We had budgeted $200,000 this year for that project. I don't know. It's not. Oh, it is here. We have $200,000 budgeted for improvements and repairs to the T-Dock. We're doing minor repairs this go around along with the. Oh gosh, we have a public safety meeting in 15 minutes. So we are rebudgeting a portion of the T-Dock repairs rather than installing a new water and electrical system. The tenants have requested that the city request a permit modification to extend those finger piers for better use of those. So we are doing some repairs now that will be completed by the end of this fiscal year, but that extension of the finger piers will likely have to be deferred until next budget year towards the end of this season. So that's why we're budgeting $150,000 for that piece. The public dock project should be completed by the end of this fiscal year. Substantial completion is scheduled for May. So unless anything happens that changes that schedule, we're not rebudgeting that project in FY25. There may be some migration towards the summer months, but we don't anticipate that happening yet. And that's really it of what we have scheduled for the marina. Just want to make sure you note the marina dredging. We have that for FY26. We're currently in the permitting process for that, or preparing the permit application to submit to the regulatory agencies. And bulkhead and the boat ramp, they're on line 313 and 314. That under the city's current agreement with the marina tenant, that is the any replacements or extraordinary repairs are the city's responsibility. So that is something that we'll have to be looking out in the out years of potential funding needs to be able to do that. We do have in FY27 the recoating of the marina bulkhead. We did that a few years ago, and the intention is to continue and add life to the to its lifespan, and hopefully not have to replace it in the next 10 years. But that's just something that we have to keep in mind and keep it top of mind, that it'll at some point we'll have to replace it, and that's going to be a big expense. All right. Are there any questions?
Thank you very much.
All right, our next meeting, 9 o'clock, March 5th. Does that work for everybody? All right. No further business. Motion to adjourn.
Second?
All in favor?